Hi, welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of Take Me Back, the interviews. We're bringing it back because I sit on the board of the Rural Resource Commission, as does our guest today, and my co-host, Franni. This is Franni Hoag. And I thought, you know, it came out of a board meeting about oral histories and continuing to record them and archive them, as we did with the first 20. So, Franni, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but can you tell us what this organization is all about, the Rural Resource Commission?
Sure. So I work for the Mad River Valley Planning District as a community planner, and one of the commissions that we help administer is the Rural Resource Commission. The Rural Resource Commission is charged with identifying and helping preserve historic properties and different types of historical education projects in the Mad River Valley. The Rural Resource Commission is actually the first certified local government in the state of Vermont. And so what is a certified local government? Towns or different groups of towns can band together to have these CLGs for the purpose of identifying historical properties, in some cases getting them on the National Register and making information about them more accessible to the public.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course.
And today we are welcoming Ellen Strauss here today. I was thinking about, I've been in the Valley 40 years. I came in 86. And I met you quickly, I'm not sure how, but I have known you a long time, but I've known you in different capacities. I knew theoretically you were an architect, but I never had the chance to cross paths at work. But we both have 3 sons, and our youngest sons became fast friends in preschool.
Yeah.
So there were, that's really how I knew both you and Jim was as parents, you know, and he was such a delightful child. I'm sure he's a delightful man.
He is. He's really wonderful. We could talk about him for the next hour.
Right. And we'd run into each other socially over the years, but really it wasn't until volunteering for the board that I've had the chance to spend time with you, and I'm very curious about many things.
Yeah, there are a lot of secrets in there.
Well, let's start here because, as you know, for the last 5 years, I've been working on the history of the Valley. And, you know, I've identified very important years where pivotal change happened. So I'm just curious, when did you first come to the Valley? What year?
Probably 74, 75.
Okay.
I was here for the Eagle float at the 4th of July, which was 76, which was actually the year they buried the time capsule. I was still in architecture school then, but that's when I started, you know, coming up here on a really regular basis. But I wanted to add something to what Franni was saying about the rural resources, not to completely leap away from my personal life, which is long.
That's right. I'll leap us back.
Long,
no
and
worries.
But the Rural Resources Commission came out of a study that Bob Rose, I think, spearheaded as with Jeff Squires, who was the planning district planner at the time. And I think it must have been around 85 or so, because I had kids, but I didn't have Cooper yet, because which is our son's cohort in common here. And he said, you know, there are a lot of really valuable things in the Valley. We need to make an inventory of them. And the inventory was 4 parts. It was scenic, agricultural, historic, and river and trails. So everybody broke into groups. There were probably 6 people in each group, and people studied those things and came up with a report that was the rivers and trails, which is what I was doing at the time, was making an inventory of all the 4th class roads and all of the trails that people used that were public trails, and tried to keep secret the ones that were heavily used trails that were not public, because the people who owned them really didn't want them to be on there. And the river was a big issue then too, because I think it was before the Mad River, Friends of the Mad River started as well. So out of that group, a lot of different things started, and there was a historic group that did, basically the state inventory has any house, any structure that's 50 years or older is on the state inventory. But there were a lot of districts that were really important because they were intact still. Like Waitsfield Village was a whole thing, and the Waitsfield up where Von Trapp's is, that area, which was
the Common Road.
The Common Road area. So there were a lot of districts that they could put together, agricultural districts and town districts. Warren Village got on. There was an interest in, industrial past because Warren was a mill town, and Waitsfield was the fancy summer place from the people from Montpelier. So, one of the, Fletcher Jocelyn, when he found through some weird thing, asked me, you live in Warren? Do they still pass the jug?
Oh, that's great.
So, it's interesting how small studies that really gather a lot of people, it really put taking care and understanding some of our past helps to make decisions about the future for the Valley. And at the time, I was, a new mother, out of school, starting my own office, and of course I had tons of time to volunteer. So, and that took off because after that, my group did a lot of trails at work. We started the rec path in Warren, and then I think it might have been Brian Shoup next who said, hey, let's get a certified local government going and get some grants to put some of these things on the National Register. And so it became a little bit more focused on that. But some of the planning studies didn't have to do with the National Register at all. They had to do with streets. Our streets are our community. If Waitsfield had 60 miles an hour going through it, nobody would ever walk. People barely walk there already, but the streets really belong to the towns and the people around them, not the AOT. Even though the AOT is great, they're not great at taking care of our towns. So they're my first run on opinions for you.
Well, I'm going to circle back
Okay.
because clearly 1965 was a huge year of change in the Mad River Valley. Mm-hmm. But the next wave was the early 70s, and there was a variety of reasons people came. Mm-hmm. Now, I consider architects artists, and as an artist, I'm really curious, what were your experiences? The sounds, the color, what was happening here when you moved here?
When I moved here in maybe not until 80. 79, I got married in 80. I was working in New York City, coming up to see Jim, who was my boyfriend. And the reason I came here was because he and 3 of his friends decided that architecture school had a very limited value. You had to know how to build in order to do real things, and you had to, in order to do experimental stuff. So, of course, as a young architecture student, that was incredibly attractive to me. Cute guy living in Vermont, learning to build.
Yeah.
And my first summer up here, I worked for Circus Studios, and I worked on one of the units at Dimetrodon as a carpenter. And it was great. It was just, it gets you grounded, finding out how many steps there were. So the Prickly community, which Jim is part of and didn't start, but is part of it, offered a lot of interesting things. Everybody was, wanted to do everything for themselves. They wanted to learn how to build, grow gardens, have horses, have pigs, have sheep, all of this stuff that actually at that time a lot of the Vermonters were like, enough of that stuff. We don't want to have anything to do with it at all.
Yeah.
I'm very happy never can another vegetable in my whole life. So we were sort of not, I can't say, back to
The land
movement, but sort of let's learn how to do all this stuff ourselves. And for me, it served me really well because I got the experience of some real-time building. When I worked in New York City, obviously it wasn't that valuable because everything was a skyscraper that I was working on.
Right.
But back here, it is really valuable. And I think it also taught me to really appreciate the skills that people have. The plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters, the finish carpenters, the septic installers, all of it.
Right.
Because it's really important.
Did you work with Leonard Robinson?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fabulous guy. And I think I've tried to get more information. What was it like for him? I've been asking his family members.
Well, he must have been like the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
Because not only, was he an athlete and took care of his stuff, he had all these kids, 9 kids. He was always digging holes for people. He was always dreaming. There's a great time in life when you're young and you don't know what you can't do. And you can do anything. That's what the Mehuron was all about. All these young guys coming here and saying, oh, we're going to build a condo, we're going to sell our units in a year and make a lot of money. 25 years later, they're still living there. That's not what happens at all. But a few of them keep that sense that I can do anything. And Leonard was one of them.
Right.
He was just, oh yeah, build a lake? I can do that.
I am relatively new to the Valley, and I actually visited Blueberry Lake for the first time last week, and I feel like that spirit of you can do anything when you're climbing up the trails there, and even just looking at the lake itself, you really feel that. Mm-hmm. It's something really special, I think.
It is. I mean, before he built that, it was Gove Swamp.
Yes.
And
what was it? What swamp?
Goves.
Like Bob Gove?
Yeah. Bob Gove, I think, was a cousin. What was the name? Gove's Wraith. What was his name? He was the brother of Thelma Neal, who lived in the village.
Right.
And her husband owned the IGA, which was in the parking lot of the Pitcher Inn. So, there were so few people in the valley at, just before the wave of people who moved in the 70s, that everybody was pretty much related. It was pretty amazing.
Zelda Levanway told me that if you've lived here 4 generations, you're related to everyone. And the Hare family's been here, I don't know, 8, 10. I'm just taking a second to the listeners or viewers. We will probably be repackaged for radio. So from time to time, I want to stop and say we're talking to Ellen Strauss today, architect in Waitsfield with her husband. He's your partner, right?
Yes.
In many ways.
Sanford Strauss Architects. He's gone the distance, that poor guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to dig way back when Ellen first came here because it was a very different place, and I'm just so interested. Many of you may have noticed how many architects live in the Valley or have been associated with the Valley, and that's part of Ellen's stories. Like, how were they all drawn here? You're talking about building.
I think they were drawn here because of the design-build possibilities in Vermont. There were very few codes, no inspections, and you could do almost anything. And at that time, in most of the rest of the country, codes were a little bit more developed. So there was a chance to do multifamily housing without having to put a sprinkler in, things that, and also it was a very special time because materials were relatively cheap. People were pretty good at gleaning materials, like the Hancock plywood factory had got mahogany deliveries in pallets that were made of mahogany. So the plywood arrived, but the pallets themselves were mahogany. You could go and get the mahogany from the pallets and side your house with mahogany.
Wow.
So there were a lot of free things, and it was inexpensive. I mean, my first year living at Mehuron, when after we all built our own houses, but at the beginning, we had rooms in the structure. And I think we put into, $15 a week for food into the kitty. And somebody went to the Barry Montpelier Road or something like that to shop, and went to Harry's, and we got these big blocks of cheese. I don't know, maybe we ate hot dogs all the time. I don't even know. But we had a big garden as well. So it was a pretty great time, and everybody was working. A lot of the guys were doing construction around, not only here, but in Maine and in Colorado. So they would go out as a crew to do things, and it took a long time to piece life together. And it really wasn't until we all started having children that we really got to be a little bit more integrated in the community, because it was a pretty weird lot. And a lot of local people said, oh yeah, I wouldn't let my kids go up there.
Yeah.
So it's actually a pretty conservative group,
Well,
but still.
I wondered about that because my last name is Mehuron, but I married in, right? I'm an Irish Catholic Jersey girl, and it was very interesting to me, the division between the historic families. Mm-hmm. And I've been allowed to befriend them and get many of their stories because my last name is Mehuron. Mm-hmm. They do it for Tommy. I don't think for me necessarily, but I was curious about that. I mean, even in North Jersey at that time, the whole hippie, yippie,
yeah,
back to the land, whatever slant you want to put on it, there was a huge generational divide. Mm-hmm. And, if some guy, everybody had long hair, walked into my house like that, my father would be...
Go nuts.
Go nuts.
Yeah.
So you come up here, mm-hmm. where these families have been here for centuries.
Yes.
And, you're swimming in the river or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Some people embraced the community. Some people never got over it at all. Mm-hmm. And you can understand that because it was a huge wave when you think about Kathleen family, the Viennes family, Mehuron family, DeFries family. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing
Gaylords.
Gaylords. There were these big families here, and everyone else was from away. Everyone. So it was, in the first sort of group that came in were the fancy ski people. Mm-hmm. And so that was a glittery, glitzy group. But then the
Mascara Mountain, you heard it.
And
everybody.
The next group was this bunch of architect hippie types.
Yeah.
And, God knows what they were doing. But in fact, most of us were pretty nose to the grindstone types, which was disappointing to many, I think.
They wanted you to be a little bit more
exciting,
colorful.
Yeah, like Leonard embraced some of the ideas because, one of the first things the guys at Mehuron decided to do was to do this solar in 1976 or something, a hot water solar system. So they had a drip collector, and it would go. The water would exchange in these big tanks filled with rocks, tanks of water surrounded by rocks, and then you blow the air through the rocks. They got a DOE grant to do this thing. And Leonard, in
DOE
is Department of Energy.
Okay.
And because it was, they had the first Thomason drip collector in the country. There was this guy in Washington who came up with this idea. So these three guys, Bill McClay, Jim Sanford, Richard Travers, decided, let's build one. And, Leonard helped them put in this tank and the rocks all around it. And 20 years later, Leonard helped them take the rocks out and the tank out and change to a wood boiler. So, some ideas worked and some ideas didn't. But if you didn't try them, you never knew which things worked.
Right.
So I don't know if that's enough of my personal history.
We'll be digging for more. But one thing that came up in your bio was the list of different types of projects you have worked on. And I thought, how did that happen? Can you describe? I'll give you your bio. The different types that you mention here.
Well, let's see. I've done a lot of work for the town of Warren. I have renovated the East Warren Market roof to make it stand up and for some energy upgrades. I've renovated the municipal building, the structure, and what else did we do? Oh, put in the new vault, and also tightened up the building so it performs better in energy. Then for the Warren Town Hall, I've renovated that to put in the lifts and to upgrade the energy in the windows and to move the library there without changing the character of the town hall, because the town hall is a great space for all kinds of activities. And even though I personally supported moving the library there so that it would get much more daily activity, I wanted to make sure that the building itself was stayed available to, many other uses, which is, children's groups and meetings and exercise classes and all kinds of things, funerals, the occasional wedding party, whatever.
I'm curious about windows. When you go into these very old buildings,
Yeah.
and there's lots of laws that I don't know, that you have to be careful what you're doing, right?
Well, the historic ones, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you renovate a historic property and with windows that are efficient?
Well, technically, the windows are, if they are functioning and if you can seal them, the windows are usually the least important, not the least, but they're not so important. Energy-wise, the most important thing is the basement and the roof.
Really?
Because it's a chimney effect, so as soon as you encapsulate and keep the moisture out of the basement and you put a good roof on, then that takes care of most of the energy loads. Then you can do whatever you need to do for the walls. But when you think about it, the physics of it is the basement and the roof. So that's the first thing. And like the Warren Town Hall, there were grants. We had to get grants from maybe 6 different agencies, and the federal grants came with the requirement to do a Section 106, which is a historic review. So we had to have a historic preservationist, who was Lisa Papazian, on the team to evaluate what we could change and what we couldn't change in order to upgrade the building for current structural codes. We had to reinforce the roof, and we had to reinforce the second floor, which is the ceiling of the library, the main library space with the stage in it, because it was called a sprung floor. So when you danced, the floor, the whole building was made out of 2x6s, which are actually 3x6s, real 3-inch by 6-inch. But when you think about it, right now people build floor boxes that are 14 inches deep, and it spanned 35 feet. So the building couldn't be used as assembly on the 3rd floor, which is the dance floor, unless we upgraded this structure. And she was brilliant because she figured out a way, because it was going to change the building structurally. We had to reinforce the center beams underneath it. But one of the most amazing things, I'm just running on.
No, we're loving it.
Thank you. Amazing things.
That's why you're here.
Each wall was built by a different group of volunteers. So the back gable was built by one group, and the front gable was built by another group. And you could tell because they were framed completely differently.
So who were in the groups? Do you remember?
No, I don't. I mean, this was when they built it in 1860.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't here then. I'm old, but not that old yet. And so they were, just doing. These were people who were resourceful. They were feeding their family. Most of them subsistence farms, farming, logging, butter, maple syrup. This was the end of the road here. These people were really eking out a living, and they got together and they did these great projects. They built the schoolhouses, they built the town halls, they built the municipal buildings. They got together to do all kinds of things. One of the first things that Jim said he did when he came up here was they were going to put up the Brook Road. They were going to put telephone poles and wires all the way up the Brook Road. And Leonard Robinson said, you know, I can dig the trench, we can get a bunch of volunteers, and we can bury that whole thing. So he volunteered the digging, and all the guys at Brickley came down and put the pipes together and did the wiring. So the Brook Road has no telephone poles until it gets to the very top, and
Right.
they come along the East Warren Road. So people were used to volunteering on a pretty major scale, which is something that I think a lot of the architects really
Embraced.
loved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of the old barn raising thing. It was fun, and it was a lot of work.
Right.
I mean, now there isn't as much of that, but, you know, there's still the 4th of July float in our neighborhood, which is a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, it must be. They're spectacular. You're making me think of, I don't know if you read the series of articles, the Take Me Back articles in the paper, about, we got a mysterious phone call that there was going to be an auction the next day, and you better get here, or all the Mehuron artifacts will be gone, right? It's like, I still think it was sort of a scam, and yet there was a lot of things that I had never seen before, particularly photographs and whatnot.
Did you ever figure out who made the phone call?
I did, but I'm not going to say here. But one thing that it's just so beautiful. Julia, we were talking about Julia Folsom, married the first Thomas Mehuron. My son is the third, and she left this lap desk, and in it were all Christmas cards, invitations. Wow. And as I went through them, I mean, basically, they socialized with every historic name you can name.
Yes.
From Gaylords to Folsoms to whatever.
Wow.
And it's really made me think about when there are few people to count on.
Yeah.
You get really close, even if you don't.
Yes, you do.
Randy Graves, I think, is the one who told me that, because he grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So you didn't leave the farm that often, but when you did, it was a cousin's birthday party or a barn raising of some sort.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
I mean, Randy Graves' line about, you know, seeing somebody new in Waitsfield Village, and that was something to talk about. It was great, but that's the amazing thing about how small this community was, and what this enormous influx must have been like. I mean, things change. You know, it changed, you know, in the first from, I don't know, 1790 to 1860. 1860, everybody came down and lived in the river valleys and moved the villages out of the high plains, and not the high plains, but, you know, up in the common roads, and moved them down to the rivers, because the rivers was where the power was.
Right.
And they could run all kinds of stuff. I mean, Warren had 8 dams and about 14 mills. Wow. 8 dams on that little bit of Freeman Brook and the river. And Waitsfield, of course, the Miramar Ski Club was a big
the building
mill.
behind it.
And the building behind it. There were mills there, and all of the up where the cemetery was where huge lumber piles.
The Mill Hill Cemetery?
Yeah.
So
the one that's on the Bridge Street, but up high, where Strobe and who else lives there? Cemetery.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's Mill Hill Cemetery. So, folks, if you're driving through the bridge and you're driving away from the stores, it's on the right.
It's on the right. And Moortown had them as well, up high. I mean, the open fields aren't there, but those things were full of logs, because they were milling down below. They were bringing the logs there, and then they were pulling them down to mill them. And, you know, Warren Village had a tannery, 2 or 3 tanneries. I mean, we don't do that stuff anymore. Butter churning.
I found I was
millwork.
I was at the History Center in Barrie, the Vermont Historical Society, going through images, came across a big structure with tons of horse and carriages around it, and it said a business in Waitsfield. So I'm lucky enough I have connections. Like I sent
them out.
I sent it out to Randy, to Kevin Irish. Steve Jocelyn has passed. I miss him because he's good at that. But I can't remember. I think it was Kevin who said that was a creamery where the barn is, the polo field in Waitsfield. Approximately where the barn is was a creamery.
There are so many places that are gone.
Yeah. It burned.
They burned, but there was this barn here, and then there was this creamery, and then there was this shed where they did the slaughtering, and then there was this other stuff. I mean, people had to do everything, and they did.
And they did.
I mean, if you ever tried churning butter, you can see right away or making apple cider even. You can see right away why they figured out how to use machines.
Yep. So listeners, viewers, if you have not spent time on the Waitsfield Historical Society's website, we have a new website, and there's, I think, over 850 glass plate negative images, which was quite a process to be able to make that a positive image instead of a negative. And volunteers did it, but what Ellen is describing, the timber piles, there are photographs of that. If you feel like going through it, it's really kind of fun.
And you can, Jim Dodds, I think, was pretty involved in doing a lot of them.
And John Williams.
Yeah, and they are just wonderful because you can pick out hills that you can sort of recognize, and some of the buildings, like what I thought was a Folsom farmhouse down on Route 100, just near Yestermorrow. Like that has the same window pattern, so you know when you see that, and when you see the photograph of the house, you can see that was the same place. It had this big giant barn behind it, and Route 100 was a little dirt trail in front of it, which was amazing.
It's amazing.
Now let me ask you this, because you brought it up, the Yestermorrow. So the Mehuron family has been in Vermont 2.5 centuries. When they first moved to the valley, that land where Yestermorrow is was a farm, and that's where they lived. Was there any remnant of it left that you can remember?
No, I mean, not that I know. I mean, as long as I've known it, it was, what was the name of the hotel that it was before?
I can't remember, it was so long ago.
Oh, God, I can't believe I can't remember. But, it was built as a swimming pool and hotel, and maybe even a polo field was there. Why can't I remember it? Anyway.
Well, because Steve Jocelyn, the late Steve Jocelyn, he was a horseman, and even though people were coming from away, that's a Vermont expression. If you don't know it, I love it. From away, and they were equestrians, and so there were some locals who were really good riders, and Steve was one. So he said they started playing polo just like with a ski pole, and then they duct taped something on the end. It was very. But I remember him talking about that.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure. I mean, there was a very big polo scene around here. The Kings, Harriet and Dick, and Ron Anderson, and of course Arthur Williams, and all of these other guys. They actually really, because they used to play in East Warren across the street from the East Warren Market, and then they also played down there where Yestermorrow is. And why can't I remember the name of that hotel? Because
we'll remember it at 3 in the
tomorrow.
Morning. That's what always happens to me.
And people still play polo on the Flummer Field, which is really amazing.
It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Really?
We also had the fox hunt. Donna Egan was instrumental in that.
But it's very interesting what you say about, the old families that were here and the new waves of the people who came. I mean, it makes sense to me that most of the old families would sort of maybe take kindly to the genteel ski types, but maybe not to the back to the land hippie types.
Dirty hippies.
Yeah.
I don't know if
But
they said
who's
that,
here? Who's here now? Us. And it's things are changing now. I mean, even for me, I see huge amounts of change. They're talking about moving the Warren Parade up to Sugarbush. Okay, then it's not the Warren 4th of July
That's
anymore.
right.
It's becomes a commercial event. There are all sorts of things, and although I don't think that in particular is a good idea, I think it's really good to know the history of your place, know where the mills were and why they were there, because I think eventually a lot of this stuff is going to come around again. I mean, energy is going to keep on getting more and more expensive, and I'm not really a survivalist, but the river is a great asset. I mean, it's a wonderful asset for recreation, and it connects the 3 towns. So it's really fabulous. But
Another of the photograph sequences that are available online is when you're at the covered bridge where everybody swims, there was a crib dam
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And because I can never figure out why were the mills up there, right? Well, it's because they had a crib dam, flooded Couples Field, and then they dug channels to the 2 buildings that were mills.
I thought it went through, the crib dam is upstream from the
Yes.
bridge, and I thought they had a sluice that went through behind Smith's house and around to the Miramar.
I think you're right.
And it was, because it wasn't Couples. Maybe it was around at Couples. It's actually behind the Smith house where the water went around. I mean,
And they're still under the road.
talk about being ingenious, That is a huge amount of effort to get something to work, and
Yes.
they needed it. And so they figured it out.
And dug it by hand.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's great. The things that they can do, like Wayne Cathan was, he could make gold out of, any piece of old machinery. I mean, he was one of those people who figured out how to use what you had. He was the road commissioner.
I feel like I am dominating the questions, Franni, but let's just identify one more time that we're here with Ellen Strauss, who is an architect, longtime resident, still here, raised 3 children here. And just wondering, do you have any questions you want to ask?
I do. One of my questions, and you just spoke a little bit about witnessing a lot of change in the valley. How would you really characterize this change? And I would be curious to hear what has really surprised you about the change that has happened here.
Wow, that is a really hard one, because change is really slow.
Yeah.
Really, really slow. And one of the things that I think the planning commissions have been really good at is not duplicating the planning of New Jersey here. Because 2-acre zoning and 1-acre zoning just spreads development all over the place. Clustered villages and farms is much more appropriate to Vermont and to the character of the old Vermont towns and hamlets. So I think that the planning commissions have done a really good job trying to maintain that, even though it's not easy. And the other thing the biggest change that I see is the high elevation construction. And that's putting a huge amount of pressure on the river, because we are so much better. I mean, we used to have mud seasons here, I'm sure when you came here, that were unbelievable. You couldn't get, people were driving on meadows all the way around to get past the muddy places. Sometimes you just couldn't go. It was so bad. But now people are much better at channelizing the water and the runoff. So that gets it into the rivers. And I think it puts a huge amount of pressure on the river. And, also, I'm not necessarily pro or con taking the gravel out of the river, but all the gravel that they put on the roads ends up in the river. So I think that there should be a way for them to gather it and put it back on the road. I mean, our river is pretty pristine and pretty wonderful, so I wouldn't really want to do anything that degrades it, but we are degrading it every day by putting culverts in it, by putting bridges over it, by doing all kinds of things. I mean, our planning doesn't really protect it very well. And
I would add to that for what it's worth, because I'm not an expert, but of all the friends I've made in the historic families, a very common theme is we should be dredging the river. Because that's what they did growing up. They would use that material.
Yeah.
I guess it made the fishing better. That's what they say.
Well, the river is a very complicated thing. You know, when Madeline Kunin was the governor, the Agency of Natural Resources went from maybe 10 people to 200 people. So there was a lot more expertise and a lot more oversight. But science is not really objective. You know, I consider myself a tree hugger, but on the other hand, I still think that, you know, recreation in a river in a small town is important, really important. And the fact that people were jumping off the covered bridges and swimming in mill ponds and, you know, that's how they grew up. Yeah, that's charming, but it's also good for your soul to have that. So I think that there has to be more of a balance. But, you know, that's one of the things that, I mean, personally, I've been in a neck-and-neck fight with Friends of the Mad River, who I love, and the Agency of Natural Resources, because 26 years ago, we tried to get a permit to repair the dam in Warren. And that's just one little microcosm of it. But the dam in Warren was built to run the mills before they put the covered bridge in and before they built the houses that are upstream. So if you take that dam out, the river can move. Just the regular morphology of the river, it can make it move. So if the A&R is pushing the town to take the thing out, who takes responsibility for the covered bridge abutments getting undermined or the houses upstream getting undermined?
Right.
So, you know, even the fire department, you know, I think in 1978, they helped rebuild the Timber Crib Dam so that they had a place to draw water for fires. So nothing is simple. And it's just who's getting the most airtime or the most funding, I think, is how things get sorted out. I mean, I certainly don't have the answer to things, but I would love to be able to swim in that little mill pond.
Yeah,
Although I have Blueberry Lake, which is just totally great as well.
exactly.
You know, it's really interesting how things change. And, you know, the other thing is Japanese knotweed. If you take the gravel out of the river, does that mean you're just going to plant a whole bunch of new Japanese knotweed all over the roads? I mean, because that's also been what's happening. So it's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
It certainly is.
I have a question.
Okay.
What keeps you here? I was thinking about
God,
this this morning.
I just love it here. I don't ever want to leave. I love every season. I love skiing. I want to stay here. I love shoveling. I love digging in my garden. I love digging holes in my garden. My kids, they are 43 to 36. I think Thomas must be 36, right?
He will be.
Yeah. So, and they still come home. We heat with wood. We have this very fancy wood boiler, and they come home for one weekend a year. Slave labor, and we get this giant. Jim splits wood all year long, and he doesn't split it. He bucks it up. He cuts down the dead stuff, bucks it up, and then the kids all come home, and we borrow our neighbor Joel Taplin's splitter, and we run it Friday and Saturday, and we split all the wood because until very recently we heated our hot water all year long and our house with this wood boiler.
Wow.
And we're just making a move towards geothermal because I think,
tell me about that.
I think it's unfair to cause my children with their families to come here and do that. Although they love it. They love it because, you know, they say, "Oh, I'm going home to split," and people say, "What?" Well, yeah, we split wood. We do 7 cords of wood, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they say, "What for?"
That's a lot of wood.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah, and so
But can you talk a little bit about geothermal?
Well, geothermal is very expensive in the state, in Vermont, because you usually need 3 trades. You need the well driller, you need the HVAC person, and then you need the person who knows how to do the geothermal hookups and stuff like that. So it tends to be pretty pricey, but in places where it's simpler, like there's a group in New York State that is doing it. If you fit their model, they can do a relatively inexpensive geothermal. But the physics of it makes a huge amount of sense, which is you're taking 53-degree water and you're using it to cool in the summertime and using that same water to heat in the wintertime. If you're doing air-to-air heat pumps, which are all the rage now, you're taking 95-degree air to cool, and you're taking minus 20-degree air to heat. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but the technology is more direct and a little bit simpler, and there are a lot of contractors that can do that. And then there's also air to water, which is another technology which also uses electricity and air. So at our house we have old solar, new solar, and we have a battery backup power wall, and that takes care of storing the power. We're definitely not off grid. It's all net metered. And, we've been lucky. And the amazing thing is that solar has come down in price by a huge amount. I mean, I think the first one we put in was maybe 30 years ago. And 10 years ago, we redid it because it had lasted its life, and it was maybe 2 or 3 times the amount of power for a quarter of the cost.
Yeah, wow.
So it's really, in this present administration, I don't think that there's very much help for it, but it makes economic sense, and that's why it's happening everywhere.
Right.
Because it really does make economic sense.
Right.
Otherwise nobody would do it except rich people.
Right.
Or people who are getting really, really old and couldn't cut that much wood anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, we're there. Do you want to ask one more?
Yeah.
I think we're getting close.
Absolutely. Another question that, looking at your portfolio on your website, came to mind for me is there a particular building or particular project that you find yourself thinking about today where you're like, wow, I am so glad I did it that way? I would love to hear your response.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I do 2 kinds of work. I do design consulting, where I just go in and give some people the ideas, and they and their builder work take it from there. And then I do, full services, where I really am involved in the building from the design all the way to the very end. And those are the ones those are like my babies. If people have enough money, then I make sure that all the energy efficiency stuff is in there without question. And if they don't have a lot of money, I say, okay, what's the most economical thing that we can do? But in the end, I love getting to know my clients and what they need and what they want. Whether they're doing, like Philo Ridge was it was a full-on food production facility. Downstairs there was 5,000 square feet of machines that they used to make salumi and cheese and everything else that they were making. And then upstairs was all this fancy stuff, and it was pretty wonderful to do a project like that. And the same thing with the houses that I do. Very few people whose houses I've done have sold their houses. It's going to happen. The great changeover is coming, but still, it's really great to get where you're going to live or where you're going to work to fit and contribute to the piece of land that it's on. And
to your lifestyle.
Yeah,
right?
And to their lifestyle, because I rarely am living with any of my clients. Yeah. So, that's... I think of Jim, my husband, as more of an artist. He really can work the, design and aesthetics, and that's really important to me because I don't think people should live in igloo coolers. I think, you need light and you need air and you need a sense of place. So the aesthetics are really important.
Well, with that, I could go on, listen to you all day, honestly. Franni, thanks for coming.
Of course, happy to be here.
We're going to shoot for another episode 2 of this season very soon.
Yeah, episode 2 is going to be me talking about my children.
Ellen, thanks for taking us back. And this has been a great interview.
Well,
thank you so much.
Fun. And I imagine that the whole next week I'm going to be thinking of things that we should have talked about.
Well, maybe we do another one.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.